Hi, welcome to Week in Review. My name's Phil O'Connor. I'm the Live Enterprise Director here at the Oklahoman. This is where we catch up on some of the headlines making news. I'm joined this week by sports editor Darnell Mayberry, from the business side, Don Mecoy, and from our West Coast Bureau out in Los Angeles, Jacqueline Cosgrove's joined us by phone. Jacqueline, let's start with you. Big news out of the CDC yesterday about opioid use in Oklahoma. What are the latest numbers saying?
The latest numbers, I should start that there is some good news. There has been, so the overall study was looking at how many opioid prescriptions there were per county. And what the CDC found was that just across the country, there's wide variation in where and how opioids are being prescribed. And so you might have two counties next to each other that have, huge differences in the amount of drugs that people are getting. So in Oklahoma, the good news is that in several counties, we saw decreases in prescriptions from 2010 to 2015. The bad news is that, several counties in Oklahoma, about a third of counties, have incredibly high rates of opioid prescriptions being given out. So although, there have been declines, we still have a lot of people getting a lot of drugs.
And one of the things that the study reinforces, something, an investigation we did several years ago sort of pointed out, which is counties that have high rates of opioid prescribing also correspond in a lot of ways with the counties that have a high rate of overdose deaths. Those numbers were sort of borne out again in this report, correct?
Absolutely, and sadly. For example, Pittsburgh County, which is a rural county in southeast Oklahoma, where I'm actually from, it had the highest rate of opioid prescriptions, and it was number 7 on the list for overdoses. And there were about 4 or 5 counties that were in the top for opioid prescriptions that were also in the top for overdose deaths. It's unfortunately a reality. And one thing I should mention is that the CDC study was on where somebody picked up a prescription, not where they lived. But once they, kind of sorted through the data, geography and different factors only accounted for a third of the variation that they found from county to county.
And talk briefly about what the Oklahoma County numbers were.
So our readers might notice that in my story I don't use any numbers. I just talk about the amounts because the CDC used a kind of wonky way to count this data. It's MMEs, which it's a term like morphine or something. It's a way that they can show how many, it's a good way to count essentially how many prescriptions people are picking up. Mm-hmm. So Oklahoma County specifically, we were in one of the highest. We were in the highest category for the largest amount of prescriptions being picked up. But we did see a decrease from 2010 to 2015 in the number of prescriptions, a pretty good decrease. But again, there's still a lot of pills. So Tulsa County, they were also in the highest quartile for a big number of prescriptions being picked up, and they didn't see a decrease. They remained stable, which is concerning because at one time Tulsa County had about the 16th highest overdose rate in the country.
And this is part of our ongoing coverage of the opioid crisis in Oklahoma. Jacqueline has a story coming up later in the next few weeks that will look at sort of where we are, half a decade or more into this crisis here. We have a story this weekend where we look at the issue and how it's affecting the Cherokee Nation. The opioid epidemic in the Native American population has just been devastating. The rates there are even far higher than the general population. So continue to look for that. Jacqueline, thanks for checking in with us. You're applying plenty of sunscreen out there, right?
I am, absolutely, because there's plenty of sun.
Great. All right, well, good to hear from you.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right, let's turn to something a little more lighthearted. Great news in Thunderland, joyous fans. Paul George is coming to town, and he's bringing somebody with him, apparently, right?
Yeah, Sam Presti has had a heck of a week. He's basically turned nothing into something. He got Paul George via trade last Friday night in a shocker throughout the league. Paul George is an all-NBA caliber player, probably a top 15, top 20 at worst player, who's now going to be paired with Russell Westbrook. He's going to be sort of the replacement to Kevin Durant that no one saw coming. So that's going to be a really, really good move for the Thunder.
Let me stop you there. Why is this? Why did this catch the NBA so off guard? What is it that Paul George was a free agent, right? I mean, he's on. No, he's not.
He was under contract. He told his team, the Indiana Pacers, that he did not want to play in Indiana anymore, that he wanted to go to the Los Angeles Lakers or the LA market, whether that was the Lakers or the Clippers. He grew up a big Lakers fan. So he wanted to be in LA. He grew up about an hour and a half north of Los Angeles. And so they needed to trade him. Everyone thought that other teams had more assets to get a deal done. The Thunder didn't have draft picks to give up, and they didn't have really interesting or appealing picks or players, to give up in the deal. But what they did have was Victor Oladipo, who they got in the Serge Ibaka trade at last year's draft from Orlando, and Oladipo went to Indiana University, so the Pacers get a homegrown guy to go back to Indiana. And they get Domantas Sabonis, a young, promising prospect the Thunder had in its pipeline. He started at the start of the season for the Thunder. And that apparently was enough for the Pacers. But no one thought that was going to be enough to get Paul George because of the caliber of player he is.
So who messed up by not offering a little bit more that maybe have gotten them Paul George? I mean, who's the loser in that deal?
Well, Indiana is the loser. I mean, they lost the best player. They got a solid package in return in Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis, but they're not Paul George.
And why didn't the Lakers step up or whatever?
Well, the Lakers feel like they can get him next year in free agency. And that's the big concern for the Thunder and Thunder fans, is that if Paul George, he only has one more year on his contract. If he decides that he wants to opt out after the end of next season, he can go to LA as a free agent. And LA doesn't want to do anything. They don't want to spend any money because they're looking at guys like Paul George, guys like LeBron James, and they're saying, we're the Lakers, we're in LA, people want to come play here, we're a destination city, and so they're thinking they can go out and get him in free agency just outright without having to give up any assets for him.
And then the Thunder thinking is, if we only get him for 1 year, our window is probably limited, we have Russell for a short amount of time, we better give him every chance we can to win?
That's exactly what they did. I mean, this was a risky move given the fact that he can opt out and go play wherever he wants next year. But what's the alternative? You have to send that message to Russell Westbrook to say, we're trying to help you win now. We don't want you to have to go out there and average a triple-double all season just so we can be competitive. Like, you need some help. We recognize that. Here's the best we can do for you. And not just that, but they also had another big move earlier this week, getting Patrick Patterson, a power forward, a really, really good three-point shooter. He can step outside as a big man, which is sort of the new era of playing these days. And he can do some things offensively that will really help Russell Westbrook as well. And then they signed Andre Robertson to a 3-year, $30 million contract. A really good deal by all accounts for Andre Robertson, one of the elite defenders. He made All-NBA second-team defense this year. So the Thunder really put some nice pieces in place. And again, Sam Presti made something out of nothing, and they've had a really good offseason.
Don, how's your free throw shooting?
It's mediocre.
Do you think you could help him?
I hope they can find someone who can help him.
I mean, that's the one bad thing about Andre, right? I mean, it negates his game. If you can foul him every time and send him to the line, he can be a great defender. But if he's going to miss 7 out of 10 free throws, that's
But as a season ticket holder, I will say, I mean, I'm really excited about next year's team because they're going to score easier. It's not all going to be on Russell because Paul George is a great scorer, and they're going to be a better defensive team. They're going to be better offensively and defensively. It just remains to be seen how it all comes together. But I don't know that they're better. They're not better than Golden State, but they're better than the Thunder was last year.
And Kevin Durant signed for?
He signed for whatever he signed for. He took less money than he would have gotten. He didn't take his maximum allowable contract to stay with the Golden State Warriors, but that was expected. They're building maybe a dynasty out there. Good for Kevin Durant. It's good for the Thunder that they got a replacement. Essentially, in Paul George, I'll say this and wrap it up. They lost the second best small forward on the planet, the second best player on the planet, but at his position, Kevin Durant is the second best small forward behind LeBron James. Paul George is probably the fourth best small forward in the world. You've got LeBron, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, and then Paul George. So a really, really big coup for Sam Presti.
I put Mikoy fifth.
I'm a really small forward.
Hey, Don, let's turn to business. Hobby Lobby taking heat this week over some imports that they received.
Yeah, basically, and this goes back for several years. You're going back to 2009, 2010, and Hobby Lobby, the owners, the Green family, is very interested in historical, biblical artifacts, and in fact, they're planning to open a museum later this year in Washington, D.C. that's going to be called the Museum of the Bible. But Stephen Green, who's the president of Hobby Lobby, the company paid $1.6 million for scores of these ancient tablets that have cuneiform inscriptions on them, and got the stuff shipped over here. Even though at the time a consultant said, listen, some of this stuff may have been looted from Iraq. You really need to check this carefully. You need to be really cognizant of the fact that you could be, looting antiquities from Iraq, which is not allowed. And apparently they just ignored that. They shipped the stuff over here. I mean, it's somewhat apparent that they knew that what they were doing was probably pretty sketchy because they shipped it to 3 different addresses here in the Oklahoma City area. Some of the stuff got seized by customs, and that led to this settlement, which basically Hobby Lobby says we're going to give all the artifacts back, and we're going to pay a $3 million fine to the Department of Justice.
And it was not just sent to 3 addresses, but it was also labeled as
sample tiles.
Sample
Yes.
tiles.
Yeah.
So, don't know what the motivation might have been there.
And
but
the country of origin was obscured too. They said it was from Israel or the United Arab Emirates when it was from Iraq.
Now, is the Green family basically pointing to their consultant and saying, there was just a slip up there and somehow?
No, Stephen Green said we made a mistake, and he said we need to do better, and he said we will do better. And of course, part of their settlement agreement is if they continue to try and purchase items like this, that they have to file reports with federal officials and be very transparent about what they're doing and what they're bringing in and those sorts of things.
Yeah, it's led to some savaging of the Hobby Lobby folks on social media, I know. So
it has.
Tough public relations move for them. So that's the kind of information and stories that we can provide you every day in the paper, online. Pick it up, check us out. I think you'll enjoy what you see. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.